If you're hearing my voice, you know it's another Tuesday. So coming up on Worlds Asunder.
Yes, and it's bigger than you think, right? It's always bigger than you think. There's always more to it. There's always somebody waiting behind, in the wings or behind the curtain that's more dangerous, that's more evil, right? And so it's this constant pull deeper and deeper and deeper into the secrets of the world, because it is yes and.
We've read about far-off lands and adventures of heroes, but how do we elicit those feelings of excitement, tension, and wonder in others?
Creating new worlds in any genre might seem like a daunting task, but you don't have to reinvent the wheel for every story.
Welcome, weary writers, to the Book Career Network of podcasts.
My co-host is David Shadoin, better known as Shady. It's not just a descriptor, it's also his moniker.
And she's Haley H.Y. Gregor, your friendly post-apocalyptic wasteland elf.
Together, we've got enough published to fill a small shelf, but why should you listen to us? Because we called in some favors.
Our friends and colleagues, some of the best and brightest, join us weekly to bring you tips and tricks for your world building and character development. So, open up your ear holes,
get out your pen and paper,
and get ready for us to tear Worlds Asunder. This week we're bringing you the second half of the episode that aired on WorldCraft Club, James and Seth for Cockroaches and Nuggs, Part 2.
It's really interesting to me that there's such a variety in ways to enjoy world building, in ways to enjoy the product of world building, in ways to continue the exploration even after an author or a filmmaker is finished with their product. They're not going to add anything more to it. You can still immerse yourself in a world. You can still spend a tremendous amount of time, really quality time, thinking and pondering these questions. And there can be something that's really good for your soul in these worlds of imagination. So I just think it's fantastic that world building has such a wide breadth, and there's something for everybody, whether it's just sort of the momentary quick hit of, okay, I read the book, I liked the book, I had a moment of enjoyment, now I'm on to the next thing. Or if it's, man, I read this and I would love to live in this world, and so now I'm going to consume all kinds of media, games or other books, whatever it is, to be there. Or even I want to be here so much that I'm going to write my own stories in this world. I'm going to go out and cosplay as people from this world. There are all of these levels of interaction, and there are all of these different ways of enjoying world building. And I just think that's awesome.
I think really cool. Part of it is the discovery piece of it, because we talk about world building like, I'm creating this world, but it's not creation a lot of the time. It feels more like you're discovering it. You start with this little seed, and then you say, what if? And it just kind of blossoms from there. But most of the time when I'm coming up with something that's really freaking cool, it's not something that I feel I have created. It's something that I has inchwormed its way into my brain, and I'm like, ooh, I just found this thing that's awesome, and I can't wait to share it, which is really like childlike and kind of goes back to that, that concept of wonder, I think.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's to that point, right? It's like role-playing games are great for this, right? Because it's all about everybody at the table helping to build the story. And that is the end goal, right? As crunchy or soft. You talked about earlier about lit RPG being crunchy or soft, but like RPG in general is crunchy or soft. And me as a DM, I tend to play a little bit on the softer side because I lean into rule of cool. While I keep the dice in there and I keep the numbers going, there's also things like Delta Green where you're like, this is really more about how sadistic can we be to the players, and then things like that. but each RPG has its like its kind of lane, its idea of building something out, and then honestly, the Worlds Asunder crew has probably heard me tell this story before, and some other people have, but the reason I got into writing in general was because I started at DMing a brand new world, not based on anything. I used D&D. I stole some rules from the Game of Thrones RPG, a couple rules from the Dresden Files RPG, and I threw together this kind of amalgamation of a game based on an IP that I had come up with when I was 16, and that caught the eye of my now co-author Casey Azell, and she goes, "Hey, you did really well with this, just coming up with stuff as we went." I was like, "You guys came up with stuff, right? I furthered it. You know, I gave you an open sandbox. I told you what I built, and I let you find the edges and then continue." But that's where, like, to me, if you want to see like the purest form of world building, is when you get a table with groups of players around and you do that. But then that same co-author and I, to finish our book, we went back in time and watched LA Confidential, and we went, what if, right?
Yeah.
We were kind of stuck. I was stuck a bit on the ending, and I went, it's not good enough. It's not what we need. It's not how we want to build this world out. And she goes, let's watch something that's in the flavor, and then what if?
Yeah.
I love the idea of yes and as a way to drive something forward. But I definitely resonate with that. I have to say, Dresden Files RPG is one of my favorite games of all time. You
need to live closer so I have somebody to play it with.
It's true. I'm here for that.
It's such a fun game. And one of the things that's so fascinating about Dresden's world is it is the epitome of yes and. Dresden's constantly going, wait, you can do that? Wait, that exists? Yes, and it's bigger than you think, right? It's always bigger than you think. There's always more to it. There's always somebody waiting behind, in the wings or behind the curtain that's more dangerous, that's more evil, right? And so it's this constant pull deeper and deeper and deeper into the secrets of the world, because it is yes and yeah, that's I have to agree. I've been writing for a while now. I've written a couple books, and the and probably my favorite part of world building is the collaborative aspect of interacting with readers, and them going, oh, what if this is true? And me going, well, now it is.
Yeah.
Right? Which is exactly how I DM. All my players go, hey, maybe this is true. Sure. And right. And it's so I absolutely love and resonate with that idea of yes and, of getting people together and letting multiple people engage together to create something, because what comes out is always better than what I can just come up with on my own. So that's another thing I love about world building, the collaborative aspect. I'm making a list, by the way.
There's always more to it.
Yeah. Sorry, Haley, go for it.
Oh, no, sorry.
I thought you were ramping up.
I absolutely could, which is why I'm here, right? The current series that I'm releasing is actually, it's in somebody else's IP. So it's a good friend of mine who writes an urban fantasy series. He's got 5 books. And he said, I want to expand this. It's heavily folklore based. And he said, go pick another pantheon of gods, or, go find a folklore that you love and tell me how they're impacting the same world. And so his is heavily Celtic folklore. And mine, I went into Slavic mythology. And so I've been able to dig into a lot of different, like, old Russian fairy tales and, you know, Eastern European myths, and it gets real dark and real weird. But it's been great. And it's funny because you might look and say, oh, there's 5 books in this series. It's all told, like, that's it. But there's always, like, if you start poking holes in any given, you know, story that you've written or a game that you're playing, you can always find something that you can go, oh, wow, and start, like, pulling at new threads.
Yeah.
That's the Milesian Accords by John R. Osborne. And John has been a guest on Worlds Asunder for us, too. So
Yeah.
Oh, that's excellent. Definitely check that out. That's really cool. Yeah, one of the things that, like, and this is where sort of even this idea of core concept that I like about this is that there is flexibility, but in using sort of a more anchored concept or theme, you can create a bit of a walled garden to play in. So I've experimented. We really like this idea of relating gardening to world building, and I think there's more than 2, but there are 2 major gardening philosophies, right? You have, like, the French garden, which is pure, solid, pointed, geometric lines. I will bend this into my will. And then there's an English garden, which is overflowing flower pots, and it's like there's chaos in that garden. It's the Weasley's garden, right?
Yes.
And that is almost the way that, like, in Seth's description of this, there is this creation of a world in which others are collaborating and others are joining in, and they're sort of blooming in that place. That yes and philosophy, that expansion, that allowing the room. And I think it's a fascinating thing. Like, when I'm creating with players, I feel like my first goal when I'm running a session is to help them understand directionally where I'm going. And then to kind of be like, as long as you're roughly pulling in this direction, like, I am not going to stop you. You know what I mean? Like, if you say, I know this character, and I'm like, oh, cool, what are they? And it's like, you know, it's my latest adventure is a traveler. It's a traveler campaign, Mongoose Traveler, and it became cozy. I didn't realize I was making cozy, but I based Planet They're On from on Cornwall, where I grew up. And so all the characters have Cornish accents, and then it became lots of cups of tea and local customs and traditions and occasional gunfights. And that was kind of, but that vibe, within that walled garden, there was a lot of room to play. You know, there's a lot of room. But I think one of the things that Seth and I had discussed speaking about that was this notion of boundaries, like setting sort of the finer limitations on what you're creating. Because, yeah, Dresden's going to be, I know very little about Dresden, but there is a vibe. There is there's going to be some sort, like, it's not just going to be absolutely anything goes. We're not going straight Willy Wonka. Like, you've got a kind of, there's a theme, a thematic element to it. And I think that's really sort of the tension that really exists between a lot of what we're talking about, because it's yes and then, you know, the alternate no but, like, you know, on the other side of it, that I think is kind of a useful tension to include in that, because I agree with everything you're saying, but kind of wonder what your thoughts are on your bounding conditions. Do you guys tend to find that you set those limitations either in TTRPG, you guys do, or in your writing?
So we've mentioned Dresden enough that I think it's worth noting. So Jim Butcher, the author, has a couple different series, and I'm still waiting to see where Cinder Spires goes. But the other 2 that he has, right? He sets limits, but then he finds a way to bust them, right? And he finds a world building way to bust them. And he did it in Dresden Files, and he did it in
Codex Alera.
Yes, Codex Alera. I was like, The Fears of Cotteron is the first book. It's Codex Alera. And I had actually, it was funny because I didn't read Dresden first. I read Codex Alera first when it came to Jim Butcher. But he does a really good job of finding ways to ramp up the tension every book. But he also, you know, in the style of progressive lit in his urban fantasy, does power progression. And that's that's kind of where I learned myself how to set bounds and limitations.
Yeah.
Is to leave the what if, the yes and piece somewhere. Doesn't have to be obvious, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be explained at the time, just so long as and that's kind of the piece, referring back to the quote I made from Futurama earlier. There's a lot of world building, and I've on our podcast for Worlds Asunder, we've put up this the iceberg meme, and it's like there's the very tip of it, right? That's what the reader sees or what the visitant sees, and then there's everything underneath the ocean, and it's all the extra stuff that you did, whether you're a DM, even as a player, as a visitor, like you're doing all of this underneath. And then, if you're reading books and you're doing that, or watching TV series or watching movies and you're just a fan, you're doing all of that, but you're doing it in a way that you're trying to predict what comes next. Yeah. The author is doing it so they already know, or to some degree have an idea of what comes next. And that's, that to me, like, that's the kind of bounds that I use, is can I make sure that I have a way to explain it, even if I never put it out in the world.
Yeah.
So you're in a sense creating that internal consistency, both for yourself, but also for a reader who's going to subconsciously pick up on the fact that, okay, all of the pieces here fit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Inside this space.
So right now I said I was DMing a D&D table. So a bunch of friends of mine, we all game together, but we all live all across the country. So I'm running Curse of Strahd on Roll20 right now, and with Discord picking up the ability to run Roll20 on it, it's been even better. Like, it makes it easy to share. So like some of the guys from the same Discord channel that we're all in, who also game with us, they may not want to play, but they come and listen to the story. And Curse of Strahd is such an excellent horror gothic story. Yeah. But being able to take it and twist it just a little bit, so that way it's not the exact same one. Because I have one player who's a very experienced D&D player, and everybody else is new. So I know most of the new guys, they're not going to know. Mm-hmm. So I twist it sometimes in ways that helps them out, so that way they don't just consistently die over and over. But at the same time, they have surprised me with how they approach it, because a D&D player who's experienced is going to approach that story very different than somebody who's brand new. And it's resulted in some great consequences, but also some great stories. So
Haley, do you have any thoughts?
I think that boundaries are ridiculously important in fiction and in world building, and I think that that's a base concept, and it's important for your visitants. I love that word, by the way. To be aware of at least some of them. And then the art comes in, and you get to decide when and where to break the boundaries that you've set. And when, no, if I break this particular boundary, I will enrage people to the point where I have, failed in my job.
Plausibility.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
So trying to decide which rules are meant to be broken, and which ones are strategically set up to look like a boundary, and then you use it as, a plot device later on. And I think those things often can be planned in advance, but it kind of goes back to the discovery aspect, where you get into a story and you're like, oh, I know that this is a rule, but I think there's a crack in the foundation here that I could go exploit, and this could be super cool. And following those kinds of trails, and then just doing so in a way that it's still believable, so that even if you are breaking what was a core concept a book ago or 2 books ago or however long, does so in a way that is still plausible. So.
Yeah. Shady was talking about burying the yes and. So it's not immediately visible, and it looks like there isn't one. And I love that idea of a crack in a boundary that will allow you to expand out into a bigger boundary while maintaining all of the things you've built, so that you're not losing the work you've done. You're not having to restart. One of the tricky things that Lit RPG ran into, and Isekai and Portal Fantasies ran into before Lit RPG, is this idea that when you go to a new place, you have to explain the rules again. And so if you have any sort of world hopping, you're constantly having to re-explain the rules, right? But then you move over to cultivation stories, which, come out of Asia, and what they do is they say, okay, we start with a village, and then you cultivate to a bigger place. You go to the sect, or to a town, and then you go to the sect, and then from the sect you go to the nation, and then from the nation you go to the continent, from the continent you go to multiple continents, the planet, and then from the planet you go out into space into other planets, and then you go to dimensions, and so they have this ever graduated, this expanding universe where they're doing that very thing of saying, okay, I have boundaries, but there's a crack in the boundary and the hero is going to walk through it.
Yeah.
And they're going to find themselves in a new, expanded version of the same place. It's the same world. It's just gotten bigger. And I think that is really a fascinating technique. Yeah, it could probably be applied to a lot.
Yeah, Attack on Titan crushed that.
I just finished reading the third book of the Cradle series by Will White. I just recently picked those up, and that's exactly exactly what he does. He says the highest progression anyone ever reaches is Jade, and then at the end he learns that there's an entire section of the universe where gold is like the minimum they expect people to reach, which is beyond the wildest dreams of anyone where he grew up, and then it just keeps getting bigger from there. So
he does a great job of at the very beginning planting. And this is a technique of cultivation stories. So they didn't originate with Will, but he has a really good technique where he plants a power level that is so outside the scope of what he then explains the character knows.
Yeah.
That you immediately go, oh, this kid is in for a wild time, because you as the visitant know what the power scale actually is, what people can actually do. And then you're seeing this kid who's like, no, people can only do X, Y, or Z. Nobody can go beyond that. But as the reader, okay, I know where he's going. I know the trajectory he's on, right? In a sense, it's sort of that idea of, in a TTRPG that James was talking about, where you give people a direction, where you say, this is sort of what we're doing and where we're going, and as long as everything is pulling in that direction, we're good, right? Yeah. And so in Cradle, Will does a good job of anchoring that, so that no matter how weird things get, you still know where you're headed, right? Actually, Bryce O'Connor in Iron Prince, I think, does a really good job of that too, because his tagline, now I'm forgetting what the main character's name is, but it's so-and-so is going to become a god, he just doesn't know it yet. And so it just immediately sets the scope of what we're talking, of what the story is. And so the visitant can watch everything unfolding, and they know where we're going. They know where the story is headed. And I think that's just a super underrated technique.
Step 1, manage expectations.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Expectations. So where can we find your stuff, Haley, for future?
Yeah, I'm Haley. I publish under H.Y. Gregor. At the time of this recording, I am 2 of 3 books into releasing an urban fantasy trilogy. You can find me at hygregor.com, hygregor on Instagram, Facebook. I am theoretically on Twitter and Blue Sky. The theoretical is strong. So.
I'm theoretically on Twitter as well.
Yeah.
I occasionally go on there and just comment on people's animal pictures and then leave.
That is more than I do, so props.
Yeah. I like round animals. But anyway, Shady, how about you?
I'm
Where can we find you?
so Shady David Shadoin. It's both a moniker and a descriptor. You can find me at davidshadoin.com, which you can essentially find my Facebook, my Instagram, all my social media handles. You can also find Haley and I weekly on Tuesdays, the Book Career Network podcast. It's the Book Career Network, which hosts 5, anywhere between 3 and 7 podcasts. And we are Worlds Asunder on Tuesdays right now, until Nick Thacker fires us. We'll see what happens. But yeah, and then you can find me on Amazon if you want to look up my work. Mostly it's short stories. I have one novel out called Companion to Ghosts. Haley and I have a couple things out and a couple things coming up this year, which we'll release. The next thing that we're doing, is a short story, but there's a couple of novellas in the works in Malaysian Accords. I've got a whole set of novels that I owe to John for Malaysian as well. But yeah.
Thank you guys so much for having us. This is great.
Absolutely. Thanks for
Gosh.
Thanks for sitting with us and
it was
chatting.
a treat.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us. I wish I'd brought my whiskey. My whiskey had been poured into a whole bunch of dried fruit in order to make a disgusting English food that I eat every Christmas time. And so I have this very syrupy, viscous whiskey that was poured off the top of that. That is, I tried drinking it. It is just like drinking a raisin.
Was it currants?
But not like wine. Like it wasn't like good. So yeah, like it was craisins and raisins and like diced up bits of dried cherry, which you would think would be good, but I'd left it in there for several days before I poured it all off. So
this is what I've been drinking.
Ooh, Oban. It's nice. I had a friend who named his cat Oban out in honor of the whiskey. It's a good name.
Well, if you can see, Shady's a great collector. Everything up here, those are all bottles that he's collected over the years. So.
Nice. Oh, well, this one I used the cheap Canadian whiskey for it.
Yeah,
it's
that's
like
what
a blended
it's for.
Canadian whiskey.
Yeah.
I had found like 4 mince pies basically that I make every Christmas time, and I will give one to Seth later because apparently he likes them.
And last time you
all
didn't.
right. I know. Well, I didn't think you'd like it. Most Americans do not care for it for reasons that I completely empathize with. But that'll about do it for this episode of the WorldCraft Club. We really covered tons of ground on this. Where inspiration comes from in world building, where some of these ideas originate. We talked about gardening. We talked about a lot. I think a real theme for this, honestly, was like a lot of tension. It's like there was like, not that there was like tension in the recording, but more just like there are these competing ideas. You've got the sense of bounding conditions, but you also have the fact that you can break them. You've got this notion of kind of sharing content with your readers and having them sort of expand it and build upon it within the themes that you've established. I think that's incredibly useful, and I hope you guys get a lot out of it. So for myself, James, Shady, Haley, and Seth, this has been another episode of the WorldCraft Club. Thanks so much for joining us. Bye.
Thank you.
And recover from the 20 chicken nuggets that did terrible things to me last night.
You haven't explained that story yet.
Yeah.
I like the idea of leaving everyone in suspense.
There you go.
Like, what
It's
did
wonder.
the nuggets do to him?
That's right.
This is an object lesson.
Cockroaches and nuggets. There's the title.
We'll leave it hanging out there.
And that's it. You've reached the end of another episode of Worlds Asunder. This time we were guests on the WorldCraft Club with James and Seth. We had a lot of fun discussing the yes ands of world building and kind of the philosophies behind why we really enjoyed talking about it. We hope you took something away as well. But next week we'll return to our regularly scheduled programming. As always, thanks to Nick Thacker and Book Career Network for hosting us. You can find links to the WorldCraft Club and to the different aspects of Seth and James's careers in the show notes, as well as come follow us wherever we have social media. Next week, we'll have Griffin Barber to Please Read Us the Phone Book, Part 1. You don't want to miss it. It was a fun interview for all of us. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, and give us a share. Tell your friends, invite them over. And as always, thank you for helping us tear the worlds asunder. We'll see you next time.